Hi, thank you for tuning in to Food for Thought, our new series. I'm Deborah Walker, and I'm broadcasting with Natural Health Radio today, so hi to the audience out there. If you've got any feedback and comments, please write to me at deborah@naturalhealthradio.co.uk. Come and tune in to us. We have 24/7 radio with experts and practitioners who want to share their information with you. We're on Twitter under @NatHealthRadio. Facebook, you've got no excuse but to communicate with us at all. We're on SoundCloud, Spreaker, iTunes, TuneIn. Woohoo! We are everywhere, to be absolutely honest. So I've got a brand new series of pods for you for the rest of 2015. I'm working on the title of Phenomenal Women, and you'll understand why when I tell you about who's coming up. But the first person I'm actually going to be interviewing for today is Gabriella Guglielminotti Trivel, and hopefully I've got that name right, Gabriella, and she's the author of a lovely book called Antarctic Odyssey, A New Beginning, which chronicles her change after the breakdown of her marriage. She's also runs a business called Flying Inspiration. She is a pilot, she's a workshop leader, and she's a female cycle consultant. How could I not speak to Gabriella? Hi Gabriella, how are you today?
Hello, Debbie. Well, impressive introduction. Oh, gosh, I better go because I'm not sure if I can stand up to that. Wow.
Perfect. Now, tell me about your inner journey that the Antarctic adventure took you on in 2008 that you've chronicled in your book.
Yeah, it was a journey before, during, and after, actually. But let's start chronologically. I went through a very tough period between 2005 and 2007 because it was a period of change for me. I was made redundant at work. At the same time, my marriage was definitely on the rocks at the end of its road. And I felt that big things were ahead of me, for me, actually. But I didn't know what to do. I was just terrified, to be honest. But as happens in life, you know, one step after the other one, and you move, even if very slowly, and it feels like nothing is changing, you do move. And so it happened for me too. So went through the legal process, then I was temping for work. I also decided to train in neuro-linguistic programming because I've always been interested in the mind and the unconscious and all these type of things. So little by little I was rebuilding confidence and putting back together the pieces of Gabriella that had been scattered all around. And at the finishing of the end of the legal process was in 2007, and funnily enough, 2 days late after the final court hearing, I came across this. It was an event where there was this Australian explorer who was actually proposing, selling to, you know, who was interested, of course, to go with him to Antarctica. And I'm a free spirit. I was born like that. If there is one thing I can say I'm addicted to, is traveling. I really am intrigued by that. Besides nature, and what a better place to see nature if not Antarctica, really. And so I thought. I talked to him, and while I was talking to him, I realized that he possibly was doing what I wanted to do. So I thought, I have to go and check it out. And so I did. So I signed up for this expedition, and that was only June 2007. And I didn't depart for South America until March 2008. So that's why I said it was journey before, during, and after, because those 9 months after signing and committing to it, and then really leaving UK for South America, it was an interesting journey in itself. Just as well, I had some tools to keep myself in check, because the mind can take you to wonderful places and also can take you to horrible places. It's like, I like to compare the mind to a horse, that you have to manage the horse, otherwise the horse manages you. And because it's a big animal, right, we'll always have the upper hand on you. And it's the same thing with the mind. if you are not really the master of it, but you allow the mind to become your master, then you are in for a ride. Anyway, I did whatever I thought it might be useful for preparing myself physically and mentally and emotionally as well for this trip to the unknown, really, because the purpose of the group was to go there, not just to see penguins, because they're cute, okay, but that wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to go there to face fear, to basically to put yourself in a strange, different environment where you could test yourself, really. And for a master practitioner of NLP, what a better challenge than that? That was really the appeal for me. But I was, before, in those 9 months before departing, I was thinking, what is for me? What it could be a challenge for me? And I couldn't find any. But I knew, though, that the challenge is, he appears when you're ready and where you are on the spot in good universal timing, or however you want to put it. Your challenge will meet you. And it did. And so this journey became a journey from hell for me. And I would have never expected to be something like that. So I kind of, when you are really tested, I have to declare this just out of fairness. You can be a Nobel Prize winner, you can be the super scientist, you can be the super psychologist, you can be whatever you want. If you're tested and the test is right for you, everything goes down the drain or out of the window if you prefer. And you're basically just, you find yourself with yourself, your fears, and that's it. And it can be a scary place. Actually, even very scary. But it seems that that's the way we grow. So there's no really any. You can't really try to avoid them because life will always present you with the right thing for you, and that's what happened. What happened during my journey. But I didn't plan to write a book at all. I had different plans. I wanted to produce a documentary, hoping to produce something of value that could then help or impact other people's life. Because I realized that, I was a bit mad and I decided to go for it. But I also find myself in a privileged position to be able to do it, and so I felt almost like kind of a duty of care or a duty of offering also something back rather than just I wasn't going there just to take good pictures, even if I'm a keen photographer, and I love eyes, I love the lights, and I dreamt of that for 9 months. You can imagine. By the time I was actually on the blooming boat, I was just like I couldn't even feel the ground below my feet. I was so excited. And you can imagine when you can't imagine, but I'm telling you, the big test for me was, I arrived there, and the first day I was setting step, putting my feet on the ground. I lost everything. So I found myself with the thing that I wanted the most, that I looked for 9 months, and everything that I was just dreaming to create, and basically it was gone in a few seconds. To be honest, on the spot, when I realized that actually to lose your gear is not that important, because if you lose your life, it might be more impactful for you. It happened while I was slightly starting coming out of the trauma of the shock, but to be honest, on the spot, it felt like dying. Because it couldn't have been something worse for me. So, to be honest, sometime I'm sharing this because I want to to share the fact that sometimes in our life we go through some tests that are so terrible for us. Of course, they are well designed for us, ad hoc, that it can feel like going through death, you know. And but the thing is, that's the purpose of the challenge, to test you so that you have a chance to dig deeper, because there's always a deeper, and to find out more about yourself. So, to cut the long story short, what happened was I came back to UK after traveling through South America on my own as well. And I was, you know, with this idea of producing a documentary, and I couldn't see anything else but that. And after 3 years, this hadn't happened yet. I hadn't found the right content. I didn't have the funding. And so I kind of surrendered. And when we surrender and we pull the oars in the boat and we just say okay, that's it, take me wherever. And so we put ourselves in a place of receptive place where we open up and say, I don't know what to do. Let's see what happens, basically. Then something always happens. And what happened to me was the simple idea of, well, I can still write a book about it, can't I? And so I thought, why haven't I thought about that earlier?
Now, you have a lovely passage in the book where you say our life unfolds in a circle more than in a linear way, where there isn't a precise beginning and an end, but it is continuous unfolding of creation with our soul at the centre of this process. Now, it goes on to talk about, you know, the end of your marriage and things like this, but you know, so many women now and so many people lose themselves in relationships and in marriage. Why do you think that that's the case?
Oh, I have just the answer. And not because I think I know it all, but simply because just thinking of what I went through, I can easily see now with hindsight, with the benefit of hindsight, you know. What happened to me? I'm a very, let's give myself some credit. I'm a very intelligent woman who speaks 4 languages, who is highly educated and all the rest of it. And I didn't think much of myself though. And I'm saying this to clarify the fact that you can have all the degrees in the world, all the recognitions, awards and everything. That doesn't mean that your self-worth and self-confidence is equivalent to those degrees. And I was an example of that. And so here I am in my blooming years, in my 30s, and I find a man in, not because I was looking for, I was working in the Maldives, funnily enough. I was working there. I had a contract of 3 months with an Italian tour operator to be a rep there. So I meet this gentleman, British, and as it happens sometimes, I fall in love with him. And then I decided to go, once I finished my contract, to come and visit him. He happened to live in London, and to visit him just to find out what was this big fuss about him or whatever was happening with me. I couldn't understand. And then I realized that, I had fallen in love with this man, and he basically took me to move quite quickly, leave my country and everything else, and move to UK. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, especially for an adventurer like me. It was good fun and very exciting. But I didn't realize at the time then that the simple truth of if you don't have awareness of yourself, you're bound sooner or later to lose yourself, simply because you don't know any better. So what happened to me, I found myself in this very exciting new life in London, and then where I really started from scratch in a way, and And I improved my jobs, I moved forward different companies, and et cetera, et cetera. And it all was I even got married eventually. But then what happened was, I wasn't doing, having jobs that were fulfilling me, but I was just, keep doing and keep going simply because I was afraid of letting go of everything, and I was afraid I couldn't, my ego was very keen on paying for my living costs and all the rest of it. There's nothing wrong with that. But in the meantime, what happened was you exhaust yourself through jobs and work that doesn't fulfill you. Then at the same time, you have possibly, like it happened to me, a marriage, a relationship that it drains you all the time. Well, no surprise that sooner or later, rather sooner possibly, you start feeling depleted. And then, so you have the psychological exhaustion, the physical and emotional. And if you are not if you have little awareness of yourself, meaning what are your values, what you stand for in life, what really makes you feel happy, and all these things that might be perceived like something that is not necessary to know, but it is vital. Because when you start feeling stress, drain, exhausted, and all the rest of it, if you're not clear who you are, you just drift. And I drifted a lot to a point that everything got so bad. My relationship was an abusive one, not necessarily physically, but I would classify it as an emotional and psychological abusive relationship, like many others out there. And I'm a very sensitive person, and I didn't notice all these things. They just, it felt like, they fell on me. Obviously, they didn't follow me. I chose those, but unconsciously. So I put myself in a corner because unconsciously I knew I had to find myself. And that was a shortcut. It was very painful, but it did the trick, because when you are put in a corner and you have nothing to lose because you are just not present to yourself any longer. It's like the little mouse put in a corner can even have enough courage to bite a lion. But why? Because it has nothing to lose. The only option is death. So, and that's what happened to me. I found myself to a point where I felt, I was dying. And if I kept going, that's possibly what could have happened further down the line. And so it was only in that moment of desperation that I found enough courage to say to myself, enough is enough. And so that was then the starting of a new journey for me, a journey that was terrifying because I was alone. I'm still in UK. I don't have any kind of acquaintances or relatives or, that I could cling on, especially back then. Also, all friends and relatives that were kind of connected through other work of the marriage, they disappeared. So I literally find myself alone, and I am a lonely type of soul, so I never saw that as a problem. But the problem becomes in the moment when you are kind of in crumbs, you are falling apart, then obviously not being with it, meaning your soul is kind of distraught, and you as a person are run down, even physically. It's very difficult to find a center in yourself. It's very difficult. And maybe you might even have a big ego that tells you, oh no, don't ask for help because that's, it's just unacceptable. And so you keep going on your own. And sometimes having enough courage to ask for help is a very clever thing to do. But it took me a long time for me to ask for help. And I'm sharing this because I know it's typical feminine. It applies to so many women. We are very good at questioning ourselves first and thinking that all is wrong with us. And many times it's not the case. It's not wrong with us, it's wrong with what we chose that created our reality. And so we might find ourselves in very narrow places, like maybe we are in a relationship that doesn't fulfill us, it is actually killing us, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something physical. And we might put ourselves in jobs that we really couldn't coerce, and so that kills us again, mentally, psychologically. And there are many examples. So the thing is, why do I say now I have an answer? Yes, I have an answer because just several years later, I came across a psychotherapist called Alexandra Pope, and she put together a body of work around the menstrual cycle. And you might think, well, what does have to do with the rest? It's got a lot to do with the rest, and I tell you why. I was missing my cycle at a certain point because I was going through such a stressful period of time. And I knew that there was something very important for me there to look into, but I didn't know where to look to have some kind of information that wouldn't be along the normal way, which is normal medicine, just going to a GP or gynecologist, etc. Fortunately, I've been in personal development since my early 20s, so I was aware of alternative medicine, of Eastern diagnosis, and many different things that had opened my horizon a lot. But still, when we all find ourselves with a pain or a problem, it's almost like kind of our broad horizons, they shrink all of a sudden. And all we want is to solve the problem. And when we are in that situation, not necessarily we consider many options, for instance, or we are not present to ourselves like if we were in a relaxed situation, okay? And so we just go for what is out there, is more accessible. And I'm saying this because it's so easy, especially for women, you find yourself in that situation where you really don't know how to make ends meet, and you start having a physical problem. But of course, it's your body talking to you, but you just want to sort it because maybe you are in pain. And then there might be the aggravation of many other reasons, like kind of, I don't know, first thing comes to mind, if you are an immigrant woman, for instance, you might have visa problems, all sorts of different problems. So when you put everything on your plate, it becomes a mess, basically, and it's really difficult to find a way out. Now, because I was aware of alternative things, therapies, etc., I knew in that moment that I realized that I had to do something about this. I knew that I could find a better answer in an alternative field rather than just via the normal official ways, where you can find solution. So, trusting that there is a higher intelligence looking after me or somehow sending me good stuff, I thought to put out a request, prayer, put it in whatever you prefer, that I wanted to be enlightened about this because it was something important regarding my body, and my body is obviously intertwined with my soul, my spirit, who I am. And so I forgot about it. So in 2009, I received out of the blue, I don't even know how the connection was, this email about a conference call. And I found it quite interesting because the title was The Wisdom of Menstruation. And it was happening on the 8th of March, which is International Women's Day. And I thought, how serendipitous, how funny, look at this. So I listened to this, and it really intrigued me. And I thought, I have to go to this workshop. And so a week later I went. And that day, I found myself, it was in London, so I was in a room with many different women coming from different backgrounds, different countries, etc. And it was really highly interesting because that day I realized that basically I had been kept in ignorance about something that every woman should have access to, which is basic grounding knowledge about how our body works. And as a woman, as we all know, we menstruate every month for at least 30, 40 years even sometimes. So it's a huge chunk of our life. And how come that we are just possibly past the info that, well, it can be dangerous once you menstruate because you can get pregnant. So then they tell you possibly about, besides wearing tampons or pads, they tell you about contraception. But again, even that chapter is a very tender chapter because there isn't enough information about all the counter effects, side effects of oral contraception that can be really dangerous and at times some women die. But all this stuff, is not given to you because there are so many interests. I mean, pharmaceutical companies do make a lot of money out of all this ignorance. It's down to us as women to get information for ourselves because we know that there is something better for us. But basically what happened to me that then I decided that day that I would share it for the rest of my life is basically that day I realized if I'd known this basic information about my cycle when I was starting, so in my teens, and definitely my early 20s, I would have developed emotionally, psychologically, as a different woman. There was no doubt about it. And I realized that, like me, there are millions of women out there in the same position. And because I was in London and in that room, we were roughly 30 women, there were so many women that came to that workshop because they are regularly in pain. And fortunately, I've never been in pain, so because of my feminine cycle. So to become face to face, to get face to face with such realities, it was really shocking for me because there were women in pain, women that would attach to menstruation a sense of guilt, of being dirty and ashamed, and you can go on. And I thought, well, how come something so natural? Nobody would be alive without that because nobody could be brought into this world without a menstruating woman, So what is connected to the life force, the force that creates us. So how come that we have reduced this thing to something dirty and full of shame? It's ridiculous.
Why do you think that's the case?
Well, my so far the best thing that came up for me is pondering about the subject is that, like everything else that has got power, it becomes a taboo. Another example could be money, spirituality in itself. There are taboo subjects, sex, and by taboo, I can explain even better. A taboo subject is something that you wouldn't talk about it in a public place, loudly shouting. And I don't know if you notice, but so many of us, if they have enough courage to talk about menstruation, they at least look around to see how many people are around, and then they lower their tone of voice. And that tells you that obviously something that is considered not a thing to talk about, or not in an environment which is more social. So my question is why? But the same thing is about, for instance, sexes or money. Yes, you might think, oh, well, we are in Western society, we talk about these things, etc. It's true. But the proof that these subjects are still taboo is the fact that you can take any paper, any magazine, any tabloid, and you start browsing them, and you will find at least an article about the subject. And this means that we are now swinging to the opposite of with the pendulum, right? Before we wouldn't talk about this stuff. Now we talk all the time. But talking about it all the time doesn't mean that it is not taboo anymore. Because you swing from repression, you swing to the opposite, You put everything in the open, but that doesn't mean that it still runs you. We are still so much conditioned by all this stuff. And if you think about menstruation, it's strictly related to our sexual life, of course. And so what's a better way to keep women in check, in control, than keep them in ignorance, basically, and withdrawing from them the very tool that is our birthright, which is, the beautiful body we have that is so magical, and that every month gives us wonderful different states, because the cycle in itself is it's not just the week when we bleed, it's just the whole month. And in that whole month we have we go through different, I call them season, but through different energies. So basically, if we are not aware of what's going on in our body, we are missing out. Basically, that's what I realized that day when I went to a workshop, and I realized I missed out on this knowledge, on this self-development natural course that all women have, but very few possibly use it, because it's something that is considered like kind of, it's considered taboo.
Do you think that there's been a conscious suppression of women's knowledge about their bodies?
Well, now the ins and outs of what happened in history, I wouldn't dare to go there. I mean, I don't know. My inclination. Okay, let's put it in this way. My feeling or inclination or guess is that in the last 4,000 of years, definitely. The patriarchy took over for sure, compared to, but even longer than that. The civilization where the godmother was worshipped, they are so much more ancient. And anyway, we also know that even history books that are written just with the little information we have at the time. So, they will change in the future when we'll find more stuff. But basically, there was a time on the planet where there was possibly matriarchy. That doesn't necessarily mean it was better. But to be more factual and realistic and close to today, in the last 4 or 5, whatever, thousands of years, we have lived in a world that is deeply steeped in the male values, which is basically, again, not to say that men are bad, but it's just, money becomes important. Everything that you work becomes important. Conquesting the world is important. Everything is considered something like kind of, the planet is considered something that is outside you, that you have to discover. Conquest, conquer and dissect and find out and use, etc. There's no awareness that actually the planet is us, because we are highly dependent on that. And in majority of different, civilization was always considered as a mother, as a feminine. Simply because, we were more connected to the earth, realizing we cannot live without it. So that's possibly why we develop, consciously, as collective beings, we develop this kind of worshipping something that gave us sustenance. So, but that means that is something that feeds you like your mother, you wouldn't kill your mother. That's the thing. You would nurture your mother and you would say thank you. So the female energy is a nurturing energy that obviously complements the male energy, which is much more outward, linear, and, originally there were hunters and gatherers, meaning the women would be gatherers and the men would be hunters. So you can imagine that in a life like that, in the beginning, men develop skills. They are more prone to make you efficient and successful in the outer world, whereas women would, give birth and have children and would possibly stay at home and cook and all the rest of it. So you develop different skills. It's just different skills. So, for a mother also giving birth physically herself, it's almost like kind of more difficult than to kill the baby, right? It's an instinct. And so I think what happened through thousands of years, because men have started running the world, we have lost all the value. They are more feminine. And so for whatever reason, we have trodden such a path. And even if we are just born in the 20th century ourselves. I mean, ourselves as you, Debbie Walker, me, Gabriella, but we carry in our genes, in our body, the memories of our ancestors. So in a way, the conditioning that we have right now is not really just something that we undergo in our life because of the media, of the education, or it's something much more ancient, So in a way, it's like comparable a bit to, for instance, some basic phobias that we all have, like for snakes or insects, Originally, possibly that meant had make sense because living in the jungle, you are kind of bound to encounter a big insect or a reptile that might kill you, right? So in a way, we developed that fear because it was useful. It was sustaining you more longer possibly on this planet, because if you were afraid of these things, you would take precautions. And that's the same. Then when we evolved, we developed obviously other fears and other habits that possibly they might have been good in the beginning, but they make no sense in the 20th century. Forget about the 21st. And so I think in a way, we as women, we kind of, we severed our bond, with our body. And, we didn't realize that more and more through the centuries, but basically we started considering our body as an object. Like men see it as an object. It's an alluring, very pleasurable, a nice object to look at, but it's got a wisdom in it. And if we are not getting the wisdom as well, then it's very easy then to have no self-worth, no recognition of who we are. And going back to the fact of what I experienced myself, highly educated woman, but very low self-esteem and self-worth. So it's equal trouble.
Our cycles can tell us a huge amount about ourselves, can't they? And it is fascinating when you're talking about the male values taking over in society. I think that's very relevant about medicine. I think for a long, long time it was very male dominated. And interestingly enough, it's now becoming very female dominated. And actually, as soon as it started to become female dominated, there's a big outcry about the fact that it's becoming feminized. But I do think women are trying to refine their role as healers in our society, in a very patriarchal society. And with science being so dominating, that is now becoming their main route in. And unfortunately, as you say, the wisdom of our bodies is still lost in that sea of medicine. And it is coming down to almost the healers, the old-fashioned healers, to re-educate, isn't it?
Yeah, and while you were saying all this, I was just thinking, let's just think of the gynecological world. Most of them are men. This is ridiculous. How can a man, who's got a penis and not a vagina, can have the slightly ideas of what goes on in a female body?
Well, I think the interventions that are actually carried out at times, the removal of areas of the female anatomy clearly show the lack of understanding in regards to how that system actually needs it there to actually be able to continue functioning. And so I do think there's the patriarchal approach as in medicine has become very much almost treat everything like a disease state. So our menstruation is actually wrong, and if it's slightly out of balance, it's wrong. Rather than it's giving us a message, well, actually that's wrong, so put us on the pill. Something's not happening with the ovaries correctly. Right, well, we'll put you on this. So in effect, it's being treated almost in an industrial way rather than actually as a messaging system, as a communication system in regards to, it telling the woman clearly that something's not happening in the way that it should be doing, and that if you listen and change things, it will come back into balance.
Why is that so many women, they just put basically themselves, they carry themselves, really like their body, they take them to the GP, then they move it, they are passed to the gynecologist, then they pass to the surgeon, but basically they go through all this process, and then eventually, unfortunately, many times it happens that women are put through surgery, because as you said, the removal is seen as the ultimate finishing, closing of the subject, right, of the matter. And they are basically taking themselves, meaning their spirits, out of the equation. It's almost like kind of they are saying, "Oh, you are the doctor, you know better than I do." But how come? Do all of us do question this? Maybe sometimes, maybe more cultured women, maybe, but not even that. Not even, let's say, women with a higher level of education do this sometimes. So I'm saying this because I'm so passionate about this, because as women, we have to wake up collectively. And waking up just meaning let's reclaim our rights of meaning let's pay attention to our body, let's cherish our body. Let's not think immediately if something is painful is happening with me, there must be something wrong with me, and then go and ask for the verdict of somebody we give power to just because it's got a white gown on.
But ultimately, if your parents haven't had this knowledge, it's been lost over generations, as you've said, because, for instance, I was just basically, as soon as my period started, I knew it might be coming up. It started, was given no information about it, and just got on with it. Just got on with stemming the blood.
Get on with it.
Yes. It wasn't seen as a positive. Actually, it wasn't seen as a negative in my family. It was just seen as something that happened to you. And something, as soon as you got into your elder teenage years, became something that potentially you could stop from happening to you. There was no clear understanding from my parents. There was a cycle here that actually was important and that was very influential over my emotions, my behaviours, and my overall health. So if that hasn't come from my previous generation, that probably didn't really come from the one before that. So we're going back quite a way, aren't we, in regards to how it's been eroded to how it's now seen today?
Oh, absolutely. And also the other thing is, if we go back in just a few hundreds of years, the healers were generally women. Mm. And herbalists, and then obviously labeled through, in some countries at some point, as witches. So the witch hunt has gone on for so long, and it kills so many people. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So it's better not to look at the numbers, because it's the same thing. Like when I went down to Antarctica, I was looking at numbers of how many whales we killed as a human race, and again, how accurate are the stats anyway? But it's crucial. I feel the pain in myself just reading those data, because you think, but who are we? How can we be so horribly cruel and totally detached from everything that should be classified as human? Human meaning feeling, nurturing, caring, not just a killing machine. Basically.
Yeah. But it's a disconnection, isn't it, effectively?
Exactly. It's exactly it. So women, because we give birth, and our body is designed to basically nurture another human being inside of ourselves, obviously we have deeper feelings, deeper sensation. Even just the fact that our genitals are all in the inside, rather than the outside, like for a man, right? So, and obviously they are totally complementary, they fit together with a man's genitals, but that's just to show you that our body talks, but if we don't pay attention to it, and we start understanding the language of it, obviously it's so easy to then start going the wrong lane, meaning the wrong lane, feeling, there's something wrong with us.
So can I just ask, if you had this knowledge that you now have, how do you think it would have changed how you experience your life now?
Yeah, now, for instance, I give you very practical examples. That day that I was in that workshop, I was thinking, one of the first things that came to mind was this. I remember very well when I was in my late teens. I remember feeling really vulnerable as a woman. By the way, my mother was fine. Okay, we didn't have a fantastic relationship, but I was a rebel. She was a devoted Catholic woman, so there's a bit of a gap between the two. But anyway, we didn't have a fantastic relationship, but it wasn't the worst possible. I heard of many stories much worse than mine. So anyway, but I'm saying this simply to say, bless my mom's heart. She was the best she could be. She had very low self-esteem as well. She would always say yes to my father, even if obviously was patent that he was proposing stuff that didn't have much sense, but she would just by default say yes. And I realized that wasn't right. It didn't make any sense, but that was what I was experiencing. And by the way, by then I was already in my teens, where I started thinking with my own mind, right? You think of all the conditioning we are totally left and absorb one from conception till we are 7, 10 or whatever years old, right? We just absorb what we live in the surrounding, their thoughts and everything, from our parents. So basically through that, we absorb what they absorb by their parents, etc., etc. So as you said, we go a long way. Now, when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I remember, of course, already, I'm not that ancient, so I was already living with the media and all the rest of it. They had already been invented by then, I grew up in my, in the 80s, I was a teenager, so, in the early 90s, I was in my 20s, so, I could obviously notice all this bombardment of the press, of the media, of films industry and all the rest of it, and you absorb all these messages. They are telling you you are a woman of value just if you look in a certain way, you do certain things, etc., etc., etc. There isn't so much that they actually value you as a person or encourages you to discover yourself. Not at all. I mean, in the general mainstream, right? So you can get that only maybe through other ways. Maybe, I don't know, your family or your relatives or maybe your mom's friends or whatever. But if they are also like indoctrinated, basically you don't stand a chance to have anything alternative in there. Unless you are a rebel, as I was, and you start thinking with your mind, with your brain, and you think, but this doesn't make any sense to me. But it's so difficult to break through this conditioning, especially when you're so young. So if I'd known that actually I had something in my body to value, to follow, because it's my guide, and that guide is personalized to me as a person, as a spirit, right? Because that's what the menstrual cycle is. It's different for every woman, So if I'd been just given that little few hints, few tips, not much, I would have anyway developed my self-worth in an organic way, meaning that, of course, you are very different in your teens, then you go into your 20s and you evolve, and then you go into your 30s and your 40s, and basically we evolve. It's just what we do in life, right? So that simple system called the feminine cycle that basically makes you experience 4 different energy every month is almost like going to university, right? It makes you, it deepens you in the knowledge of yourself. That's what happens. So you don't go outside for inspiration any longer, because you know that during that bleeding week, it's good advice to take care of yourself, rest, and pay attention to your dreams and see what comes up for you. So if you have to make a decision for something important in your life, bleed on it rather than sleep on it, because then you will have inspiration in that week. So you don't have to go always look out for advice, help, or whatever. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but first listen to what your body has got to say. It makes sense. Yes, it makes sense, but when you don't have that, you might be guided by serendipitous events and you might come across it, but it didn't happen to me. It happened only in my 40s. And when I discovered, I thought, oh my God. But then especially thinking about my early relationship with a boyfriend, right? And I remember very well, feeling so uncertain, especially for contraception, feeling so lost and not really knowing. I couldn't go to my mom and ask this type of question, being a good observant Catholic, and so what are you left with? Yeah, girlfriends, but possibly they are not any better concerning good knowledge, and so really you're left to your means. And it doesn't have to be the way. In the past, ancient past, women would gather in circles or would have, now we call them like tent, but whatever, it doesn't matter the word. The thing is, women have this, being originally big gatherers, they would gather, right? So the whatever knowledge would be handed down from one generation to the other one, from older women to younger women, and that would create a sense of direction, of self-worth, a sense of self, with a capital S, that of course ancient women possibly had. And we lost it. We totally lost it. And and when I say this, obviously I'm saying this because I think of how I feel and what has been my experience so far. I'm sure I'm in a big club. I'm not the only one.
I think you're probably in a very big club indeed, to be honest. Because I feel that unless you're in or outside of the Western world, I feel to a certain extent we've been taken down a route that has clearly stopped us from listening to what our bodies tell us, particularly as women, and we've handed over the responsibility to other people. Now, it's been a brilliant interview. It's been really, really fascinating, and an hour has already gone, which has been the fastest hour just recently, I have to say, of my life. Gabriella, it's been absolutely, and I could carry on talking to you about this whole subject matter, so I think we'll get you on at a later date to carry on. But Gabriella, tell people about how they come and work with you to understand their feminine cycle and what it can be telling them.
Yeah, I have a one-stop website where they can find lots of information through videos, articles, testimonials, and this website is called Flying Inspiration, and flying meaning FLYNG, like the act of flying, and then inspiration, like having an inspiration, written together.com. And yeah, well, the name came to me because I'm passionate about flying. I'm I'm training as a pilot, and so I had this is my call. But my call is to help women to fly, figuratively speaking, and to make them realize that we have a wondrous body, and the feminine cycle is our best friend, and we can go places if we only we stop and gather again, and we nurture ourselves, basically. And the planet is ready for that, and men are ready for that. They're craving for that nurture, because, patriarchal society is tough for both. It's not just, it's tough for women. Yeah, of course, men are being repressed. It's not much fun, okay. But men are not enjoying it either. They don't know yet. But they don't enjoy it either, because there's nothing more pleasurable than standing next to an empowered woman, or even better, having a relationship with an empowered woman. An empowered woman meaning not a woman who's got a big ego. An empowered woman is a woman who is totally grounded in her body, happy to be herself, radiates love. Who doesn't want that?
What a message to end on. If you want to know more about Gabriella, I've put all the links in the blog on naturalhealthradio.co.uk, so get yourself over there, or to my own website called passporttochange.co.uk, so that all of her information will be on there. And if you want to re-listen to this show, you can find it on the podcast on SoundCloud, Spreaker, all sorts of places. Make it easy for you. Gabriella, thank you so much for coming on today to Food for Thought. Very much appreciate it.
Debbie, thank you so much for giving me your time to talk about my message, and hopefully bring some inspiration to women and men.
Well, I definitely want to get you back on, because I've only managed to cover half the questions. If nothing else, I want to ask you the rest of the questions linked to the book, and particularly around fear in the prison and things like this. But anyway, we're going to hold that for another show, I think.
Okay, I'm happy to come back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.